So a quick disclaimer, this video has been highly edited on behalf of YouTube because I showed some imagery from the closing ceremonies of the Olympics and I was given a copyright warning. Oh boy, there you go. So the censorship industrial complex is very real. And when I always say that this is a good fight of good versus evil, the evil one out there who wants to show demonic and nefarious imagery, they want to have all the rights in the world to show it, but want to remove anybody's rights to talk about it, to criticize it, and to warn people about it. This is the world that we live in, but just know this video has been edited, highly edited. It's still a great conversation. Watch it all the way through because we hit some really great topics. Thank you all so much. Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome to Continue Freedom Podcast. I'm Chuck. He's Jared. This is Continue Freedom. Hey Jared.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, how old were you when 9/11 happened?
How old was I? I don't know. I was young and making stupid decisions. I was at VMI, Virginia Military Institute. I don't know what I was. I was probably 20, 21. I don't know.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how old were you the last time a president or presidential candidate experienced an attempted assassination?
An attempted assassination? Oh, I was, well, Reagan was in 81, so I was a newborn. Other than Donald Trump, I'm assuming, then, right?
Other than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So 43 years went by between the last presidential assassination attempt and the most recent one. How does that make you feel?
And that tells me that for 43 years, we had people that they weren't willing to try to take out.
Interesting. I saw a stat recently that said for the first time in 50 years, a Bush, Clinton, a Biden, or an Obama is not on the candidate pool.
Yep, for the first time.
What does that tell you?
That tells me that there are political dynasties in this country, and the one guy that has disrupted it is Donald Trump, and that is why he is denied certain security protocols. That's why he was put in a position in the first place to have a young man with no experience to actually take a shot at the guy.
Jared, are you an Eagle Scout?
I am an Eagle Scout.
Is Donald Trump an Eagle Scout?
That's a good question. I don't know. Is he?
He's not.
No.
Would you characterize Donald Trump in general as a Boy Scout?
No. No.
Fair. And likewise, does that make him less qualified to lead our country?
No, it doesn't. I was a Boy Scout, an actual Boy Scout, but I wasn't a Boy Scout my whole life. Everybody is a flawed individual. These are fallible people that are going to run for office, and we're never going to have an infallible one save.
No, that's just not true. I mean, Bill Clinton was an absolute. I mean, if they were making a statue of Eagle Scouts, Bill Clinton would be at the top of the list.
Right.
George H.W. Bush, who was the Secretary of the Navy, the Director of the CIA, the Vice President, the President, and a Senator, who's forgotten more American secrets than anybody will probably ever know. He must have been Jesus H. Christ, correct?
Not even close. Not even close.
And yet, the only person in the last 50 years of our country who's a political outsider and is willing to stand in the gap between what big government says is supposed to happen and what continued freedom in this country is created on, has created a derangement syndrome unlike anything that probably has ever existed or ever will. And that's where we find ourselves now.
That's a very good point, Chuck. That's a very good point.
This is Continue Freedom Podcast.
Let's get into it. Okay, and welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X, Locals, Rumble, and YouTube. I'm going to emphasize the comments. I'm also going to say, go ahead and share this video, because when you share this video, particularly when it comes to YouTube. It gets us outside of that algorithm, and that does nothing but help us. So I want to give a shout out to the Devout American apparel line. This is something that I started many, many years ago. I'm starting to get the samples in. I've told you guys. You're going to get to see my bald head here for a minute. But we've got some merch that's coming down the road. Here's the Devout American hat. There will be a Continue Freedom hat as well. I've got my shirt, The Sound of Freedom. We've got some amazing stuff that's going to come that way. If you go to continuefreedom.com, sign up for my mailing list, then you will be first to be notified whenever that merch is available. And there's probably going to be a bit of a discount included. So make sure you go there and check it out. I got my buddy Chuck on the line with me again today. We're going to be talking about all manner of stuff, buddy. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about. The world's a clown world, but it's good that we are, you and I, people like you and I, we're concerned citizens. That's the way I look at us. We are concerned citizens who want the best, not just for our country, but all the people in our country. So we want to deliver information to you. And I'm going to start off with a joke. You know what? Everybody should know that I'm not a fan of wokeism, all right? But how do you keep this? I'm not even going to say who this was posted by because people would absolutely jump down my throat. But how do you keep a woke teacher out of the classroom? Wokeism is a serious problem. It's a serious problem in our educational institutions, but it's a serious problem that's infecting other parts of our lives. In particular, as we talked about before the show, Chuck, was the Olympics. And
whatever. This is supposed to be the celebration of world sport. That's it. That's the whole thing, right? And you saw the response from the left side of the aisle. And again, Jared is not somebody that cares about your sexual orientation.
No,
I'm not
I don't.
either. Okay, move on. Be an adult. You do what you want to do. And yet, when I'm celebrating the best athletes on planet Earth, I'm not looking for a bumblebee to what?
I don't think that's
or
a bumblebee.
Dragon or a lizard or whatever the heck that thing was supposed to be like.
I think you're toning it down to call it a bumblebee.
I don't even know what it is. That's the first thing that jumped out in my brain. Maybe it's because I have kids, but whatever that weird thing is, I'm like, what does that have to do with sports?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with celebrating the best athletes on planet Earth? Can we just walk out? The dude from France who became kind of their icon of this Olympics, Leon Marchand. Can we just literally let him walk into the middle of the stadium and wave his hand? And everybody be like, can that be the thing?
Yeah.
What do we have to do? I don't know.
Well, they showed
you and I grew up in
Go ahead.
You and I grew up doing music, and there's a beautiful difference between playing Mozart's music, who was a remarkably flawed human being, which we did a lot growing up, and by trotting someone out as a bumblebee, being like, "This is our interpretation of Mozart's music." Well, hold on a second. What are we doing? What are we doing? How the bumblebee arrive here?
Right.
What happened?
Yeah.
It's just weird, man. And again, the other side of the aisle is demonizing people that have a difference of opinion, which is their shtick, and saying you hate people, you hate people that have a difference of opinion. That's not at all, y'all. I didn't wake up this morning thinking I needed to see a bumblebee dance, and now I have. Thanks, Jared.
Well, because I think that there's the morality in our society. This is part of what we've talked about before. We're bifurcated at that worldview level, right? And there's the Christian, Judeo-Christian principles worldview, and then there's the, relative, moral relativism sort of side of society, which is where the left tends to sit. And they poke fun at the people who still follow the Judeo-Christian principles, or if they're, just a Christian in general. So it's almost like they have to mock it in order to fit inside of their worldview. Like it's a criteria. If you want to meet the woke criteria, it's not just so much, you can't just let people live their lives and you can be a Christian or not be a Christian. That's is what it is. It's like you have to attack that side of it. And that's what frustrates me, because we're coming out of Balenciaga. Remember all the Balenciaga mess that was going on, clear satanic imagery and pedophilia. And, I don't know if I can say pedophilia. I might have to bleep that, but there was clear imagery being pushed that was evil at its very core. And it's like now they're doing it on one of the world's largest stages. And in the closing ceremonies, hey, highlight the fact that America won 126 medals and we beat China, who got 91, right? We tied them in gold, but we beat them in medals, right? We medaled more. Highlight the athletes. We don't need any of that silliness. You're absolutely right about that. We don't need any of the silliness that's some, bougie, creative way to say, I hate Christians and I want to put satanic looking imagery. Whether it's satanic or not, I don't know, but it certainly looks nefarious on its
well,
on its
and
face.
to the opposite, I would even say for kids who grew up in the marching band, a bunch of band nerds like you and me, we've lost our way when we're rationalizing that that's art. Again, that's not taking away from the ability to have art and to creative freedom, right? Like if you're in the color guard and you're in the high school marching band, and this is the choreographed presentation of Lux Eterna. Great, that's amazing. Feel free to go out and do that. But Lux Eterna it literally stands for light eternal. That has nothing in the world at all to do with orientation or ideology.
Yeah.
So you're demeaning the art. Let's pretend it's Mozart. Back to our previous reference. If you're interpreting Mozart at the Olympics, great, do that. Or reflect the actual values and I don't say values, I mean like the moral compass, but I mean reflect what he was actually writing about, because he wasn't writing about some sort of woke ideology.
Yeah,
that's a new category.
Yes, it is. You're right. Well, and it's kind of a narcissistic ideology, I guess is the easiest way to put it, but it kind of goes, I'm skipping to this wasn't necessarily the order I was going to put it in, but when you talk about people saying, I'm going to push this particular worldview on this massive world stage, it's all because I need to snub my nose at the Christians and all that sort of stuff. And the narcissism is really what leads, I believe, the transgender movement. That's kind of being forced down people's throats. And this is just kind of, it's a silly thing. I'm going to show you the video of it. But this person on the left is equating their position or their identification as a gay trans man, which basically makes them a straight woman who's pretending to be a man, so that they can have abortion. So it's entirely confusing. And then the girl on the right says that she believes that the right, the political. Well, let me just play the video. Hang on, let me pull this up here because this. It's so confusing, and it's all about this, how me sort of mentality.
Lose my rights. Like, I'm a trans man.
Why are y'all voting for Kamala Harris?
I don't want to lose my rights. Like, I'm a trans man, and I'm gay, and I have been pregnant, and I've had an abortion before, and I don't want to lose that. I'm afraid of not being able to be myself anymore because, from what I've heard, Trump's America doesn't want me to look like this. So that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm voting blue.
What about you?
I've also been pregnant and had an abortion before. I was a minor, and it would have been dangerous for me to.
I'm sorry. Imagine that being part of your identity, Chuck. I've also. It's like I have to put that as a disclaimer that I fit inside of the box that has been dictated to me by woke culture. Like that's not something to celebrate or something that you use when you introduce yourself. Hi, I've also had an abortion. Accept me.
And I mean this to dignify those two people. I imagine that those are probably two of the most traumatic moments of their life.
Yes.
And I imagine that they lose sleep at night when they're by themselves thinking, oh my gosh, that was everything about that was an awful experience. Again, whether you're for it or against it, doesn't matter. But my point is, I imagine that those are the thoughts that keep them up at night, right? And so, to your point, the worst day of my life is not something I'm going to lead off with and say, hey, my name's Chuck, and here's the worst day of my life.
Well, it's almost like you have to. Here's the way I look at this. I think it's a requirement. It's a box that has to be checked by the people around you. Like you can't be accepted until you have an abortion or you claim something like being non-binary or say I'm a gay trans man, which means I'm a woman who likes men, which means you're a straight woman. But you have to say these things, and it's making a social sacrifice and a physical sacrifice when it comes to abortion. And I can't speak for them. I've listened to Lila Rose, who does some amazing things when it comes to the pro-life movement. I've listened to, what's the other lady's name? Oh gosh.
Liz Wheeler.
Liz Wheeler is one of them, but there's many women out there, Allie Stuckey, she's a very much a pro-life person. But when you listen to them talk to people who have had abortions, and I actually just heard it from someone recently, heard her give a story about it and the trauma that goes with that. But I don't know that these two young girls right now feel that trauma because they get the acceptance from their group. They'll feel it later, I'm sure. But I don't know that they necessarily feel it right now because they're so consumed with the narcissistic me, I'm getting attention, and that's fueling them. But when that wears off and that is gone, they're left with, the death of an infant. And you feel for them for that. I really feel for them. These are two girls who are trying to find themselves, but they're being guided astray by some really nefarious ideologies.
Yeah. Well, and freedom to go down a rabbit hole just for a second.
Sure.
So my oldest, he started middle school around the heels of COVID. And so the last non-COVID impacted school year he had was third grade.
Mm-hmm.
Half of fourth grade, all of fifth grade, and half of sixth grade was COVID. And where I live, that looked like out of school for almost a full calendar year. Then they're back in school with masks on. And for kids, and particularly kids on the edge of puberty, it's awkward and cumbersome. And yeah, my oldest is smaller than a lot of his peers. And literally the very first day, he's in middle school, was on still in COVID impacted, but on the kind of the edges of COVID. And they have, like a parent walkthrough day, because again, the previous year had been completely no kids in schools or kids in schools with masks, but parents can't come, you're not safe, the whole deal. So his very first day in middle school, we get to go up there and walk through the halls and see his classrooms and meet his teachers and whatever. The very first class we went into, not the second, not the fourth, the very first class we went into. Perfectly lovely human being. She says, "Hi, I'm Mrs. So-and-so. I'll be your Spanish teacher, and I'd like to invite you to join the LGBTQ plus club." Now, he's 11 at the time, starting sixth grade. He doesn't know what that is.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm some like sensationalized right-wing nut job. Like an 11-year-old can't process that stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Hell, I have a hard time at my age processing a gay trans man with a board. And that's not being accusatory or fussy at someone that's experienced a different life than me. Like, I literally have to process each of those gay, trans. I have to process each of those statements by themselves. And I'm asking him at 11 to do it. And so he gets in the car and he's like, "Hey, Daddy, I'm so excited I got invited to join the club," because he thought it was like something you earned.
Right. Wow. Well,
and so at 11 years old, I had to tell my son, who wasn't mentally ready to process all those things, what all those things are. And this is not a diatribe into the school system. I can save that for another podcast. The point is, it's not the government's job. It's not the school system's job to tell me what to teach my kids. And also, whatever the government is telling you is influenced by their own bias and what they're trying to sell you. And so if you've been told that Donald Trump is against gay people, go find me a reference, put it in the comments and be like, "Chuck's an idiot. Here's the homophobic statements." I don't think you're going to find them. And It's not because I'm in love with Trump. As we pointed out earlier, I'm not saying he's a Boy Scout. My point is, whatever they're selling you, I don't think you have proof of. I think it's what you feel versus what you know.
Right. That's a valid point. But I will say, when you want to talk about the people's choice, that they want to limit the choice of you and other people that are parents. In this instance, this is in Maryland. Black Maryland parents are suing a DC Children's Hospital over removal, sex change, and the trafficking of their autistic son. They haven't been allowed to see him in 3 years. So I'm going to read a little bit of this article here. So African-American parents from Maryland, and they're remaining to stay anonymous. That's why they're just listing them by that, moniker. But African-American parents from Maryland are suing Washington Children's National Hospital, WCNH, for requiring them to denounce their religious faith and affirm a transgender identity for their 16-year-old autistic son in order to regain access to him and not lose custody. The family lost their son to the foster care system in November of 2021 and have not seen him since. They initially brought their son to the hospital for a mental health emergency. Essentially, this kid, I believe, had tried to either commit suicide or had suicidal ideation, something that worried the parents. The family has remained anonymous, using their moniker Mr. and Mrs. John Doe 2 in court to protect their son's identity, as well as their identity. The parents, both in their 40s, allege that the Washington, D.C. hospital denied them access to their son unless they denounced their Baptist faith and also agreed to use female pronouns for him, which they refused. Their son was kept in the hospital on emergency mental health holds for 41 days before he was placed in foster care. They allege that the WCNH hospital chaplain, Lavender Kelly, who identifies as non-binary and was counseling their son during his hospital stay, has socialized with high-level members of the Biden administration, including Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services, Dr. Rachel Levine. If you don't know Admiral Rachel Levine, I'm sure you know who that is. They are buddy-buddy. They are chummy. They hang out in the same circles. And so Levine is obviously known for expressing support for childhood medical transition. And according to the lawsuit, Kelly was brought in for faith conversion sessions with the family to convert them into what they call, quote, new Christianity. So this is all about them, this counselor saying, all right, your kid's here for mental health issues. Now, all of a sudden, these parents say that the article goes on to say, it never had any issues, no transgender thoughts, ideations, any of that sort of stuff. It reads like this child was groomed by this counselor, removed from the parents, put into the foster system, and golly, the Doe family denies that their son ever expressed gender dysphoria or a wish to change genders prior to his 2021 hospital admission, which occurred after a single episode of self-harming. They allege that the hospital staff ordered the family to accept a diagnosis of gender dysphoria for their son and to reform their Baptist views to align with those of Kelly, which entailed accepting transgender ideology and agreeing to remove certain passages from the Bible. It went on to say that this kid has been, the people the kid was put with were abused. Well, do you know who's taking care of this kid now? This autistic kid is the same woman, the counselor, who started coaching him to become transgender. So I was shocked when I read this article. I was absolutely shocked that parents, unsuspecting parents, take their kids into a hospital and they can use this system that exists to remove those kids from the parents.
Yeah.
It's grooming.
I'm a parent, right? And so I say this with the benefit of a runway of raising kids. And candidly, I basically raised you because you're an idiot. So I think back to where your headspace was when we were 10, 12, and 15 years old. And I wouldn't trust you to walk across the street. I wouldn't trust my own kids to do not dumb stuff. And the idea that the state, gosh, it's just heartbreaking to even say that out loud. The idea that the state or our government can take possession, which feels a little nefarious, but probably right, can take control of your children because they disagree with you is awful.
Yeah.
Gosh, and let me just say to Mr. and Mrs. John Doe too, you won't see this, but know to my core as a fellow parent, I'm so sorry that's happened to you. And fight like hell. I'm thoughtful of that Denzel Washington movie. It's 15 or 20 years old now, where his kid had some like traumatic heart injury or something, and his kid was in the hospital, and Denzel basically, I can't remember if he didn't rob the hospital, but he basically fought the hospital or took the hospital hostage in order to get his son treated.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And and I would do the same for my kids. Yeah. And that's not for the woke yahoos that listen to this. I'm not sensationalizing or idealizing the idea that you should go revenge against the government. I'm just saying, as a parent, like, my heart beats for my kids, and I want to do anything I can to help them, right?
Well,
And if your kid is confused or struggling with mental health, then you want to do anything you can to help them. So to your point, they probably went to the hospital thinking, yeah, I need to get my kids some help, and all of a sudden the government has stepped in saying you're not doing it right.
Well, and I think that because there's a lot at play in there. Yes, you just want your kid to get help, and that's probably where a lot of the parents who deal with transgenderism with their kids, they are being told by folks around them. You can listen to detransitioners, and they'll tell you the counselors are telling them that you have to let them transition, like they have to transition because otherwise they're going to kill themselves because the suicide rates are high. But they discount the post-transition suicide rates, which are no different. And so it's this enabling that's going on through the counselors that are supposed to be there to give them help. And there's a lot of Christian physicians out there that they're fighting for their right of conscience. This is a big deal right now with things like the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine and other folks that are trying to allow those Christian physicians who understand an alternative way to deal with these sorts of things to have the freedom to do that. And those folks, that's what I would say for parents out there. If you can identify Christian physicians in your area that could avoid situations like this, but I guess you don't always get the option. So yeah, it's horrific because this is a grooming. I mean, it's really grooming is what it is, to a certain degree.
And I'm thoughtful about people in my life that I know and love and care about, and I'm thoughtful about somebody that you and I grew up with who's got a child that's transitioned. We have sensationalized to the point of attention seeking. And again, this is part of a world where, because of when we grew up, being online wasn't a thing.
Right.
And being online and looking for attention online is now a thing. And so we've sensationalized these things, meaning ideologies and positions to teach you that if you don't have a great story, if you don't have some wild, I transitioned from X, I aborted to I, then you're not loved, you're not part of the community, you're not, and allow yourself the freedom to go back. We just celebrated 80 years from the D-Day invasion. Would your grandparents or great-grandparents, and who's listening, would your grandparents or great-grandparents, would they have that as their biography? Hey, one of my grandmothers, Mary Jane. Hey, my name's Mary Jane, and I had 2 abortions.
Right.
Hey, what?
Yeah.
Instead, her name was Mary Jane, and she grew up in the Great Depression on a farm, and then she went to work as a nurse during World War II. Like, wait, what?
Right.
So for the 2,000 years prior to now, they've had it wrong, and just now we've become enlightened and we figured out how to get it right. Maybe we sensationalize killing infants, and that will make us feel like we've arrived. Like, what? Hold on, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah. Well, I say that it's almost as if that sort of ideology, and then we're going to switch topics and start talking about World War. You were just talking about World War II. We're going to talk about World War III, but when people are adults, they can make the decisions that they want to make. And that's just where I stand on it. My only beef, I won't say my only beef. I pray for those adults who are going through gender dysphoria and having to deal with that, because I'm sure that struggle is very, very real. It's been in the DSM for many, many years, gender dysphoria. So it's not something that's not something that's necessarily new, but the enabling of children to do it. And that's where I draw the line, because 85% of those that feel gender dysphoric when they're young grow out of it. So even with social transition, when you talk about saying, okay, we'll let you, do the binding and do the, change your apparel and cut your hair short or let your hair grow longer, all of those things have long-term implications as well that are well researched. And I just hate the fact that parents are in that situation. I hate the fact that it's being done to kids. It's intentionally confusing kids. So let's move to, you mentioned World War II. I've got some World War II vets in my family. You do as well. Are we on the brink of World War III, Chuck? So this is an opinion piece, but they're listing some of the specifics. Iran beware, U.S. moves these 6 top of the line strike options into position in the Middle East. Oh boy. So they've got the USS Georgia, which is it's a guided missile submarine converted from a nuclear submarine. We've got the 8 U.S. Navy destroyers. We've got 2 aircraft carriers, a squadron of F-35C, golly, flown by the Marines, F-18s. We've got F-15E Strike Eagles. We've got all this stuff lined up in the Middle East in case something happens in Israel. And I'll give you my quick take on this. I think there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C. champing at the bit to get us into some conflict. They are foaming at the mouths because that military-industrial complex money, buddy, is going to come rolling in. Those guys are going to start lining their pockets.
Yeah, because what sells? War.
Well, I was going
to
say sex sells. It usually does, but if you're talking about this, war, baby, war.
I just looked it up because I wanted to remember the title. Shameless plug. Hunter Killer. I don't know where my camera went. There it is. Hunter Killer. Go look that movie up. It's a great movie about subwarfare.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, war sells. Has got people elected and pulled out of office. And what are we on the heels of? We're less than 100 days away from the election. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that makes perfect sense. If you rewind yourself to 1865, April the 9th, 1865, I think I got this date right. April 9th, 1865. This is from memory. So anybody that's watching this and craps on me in the comments, like whatever. April 9th, 1865, the Civil War officially ends at Appomattox. April 14th of 1865, the President of the United States is assassinated. Now, why is that date significant? Because it's on the heels of election. He'd just gotten reelected to another 4-year cycle. John Wilkes Booth, who didn't appreciate Abraham Lincoln and didn't want to be subject to his leadership for the next 4 years, says, I got to take him out. He's getting us out of a war that I want to be part of. I'm pro-Southerner. I'm pro-Southern values. I'm pro-slavery. I want out. And so there's countless other options, right? There's countless other things. John F. Kennedy gets assassinated in 1963. His re-election is in 1964. And again, there's countless other examples. My point in telling you guys all this is, yes, we are on the heels of an election cycle. And yes, war sells. Right? Donald Trump is the only, 99% certain I'm saying this correctly. Donald Trump is the only president in modern history to go through an entire presidential cycle and not take us into a war.
Yep, he is.
And speaking to a veteran here is Jared, the host of the podcast, and being friends and family with lots of other veterans. That's significant. And again, that's not pro or con towards warfare. Like, we need to defend America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, period. But my point in saying that is, don't be lost on the idea that this is on purpose, that you're less than 100 days away from an election cycle. And they're trotting out the very first female primary candidate who's a minority in presidential history. And they're taking us on the heels or on the brink of World War III, because it's all on purpose. It just is. It's all on purpose. Everything is calculated. I was listening to a podcast today with a former Delta Force guy, and this is where I'll stop my soliloquy. But he was asked, this guy's, I'll let y'all look him up, but his nickname is the Sheriff of Baghdad, because he spent so much time as a member of Delta Force in Baghdad. They nicknamed him, and apparently this is from the people in Baghdad that saw him so much, they nicknamed him the Sheriff of Baghdad. But they were asked, do you feel bad for the people of Iraq for how much time and energy you spent there or whatever? And I'm not going to use the language that he used, but he essentially said, absolutely not. Their problems are their problems. We were there to defend America. When we left, that's the moment I stopped caring about it.
Yep.
And also, if you want to look at what else has problems, again, this is paraphrasing his feedback. He's like, if you want to look at what else has problems, look at the United States of America. And this is a guy who did, 24 years in special forces.
Yeah.
He's being like, we're a disaster too. Okay. Yeah. Like, it's not to say Iran's got it right and we got it wrong, or vice versa.
Well, no, Iran's got it wrong. I mean, 100%. they're an evil theocracy. So yeah, they got it wrong.
My point generically is to be like, look, I'm not virtue signaling and saying I have this better idea than, you know, as he was saying in the podcast, you know, the people in the non-Westernized world still don't understand what cell phones are, like, let alone how to conduct themselves and behave as free people, right? Of course they took their society back into the dark ages as soon as we left because of
Well,
there are
culturally,
thousands of years of history of doing that.
yeah,
But
culturally, that's the only thing they understand. They understand authority. They understand dictatorship. That's the concept of democracy is still foreign to them, or the concept,
no.
more specifically, of a republic is completely foreign to them.
Back to your topic. I got down a rabbit hole. Forgive me, guys. This is on purpose. It's not a surprise to planet Earth that we're on the heels of an election, and we have a society that believes that a tanned individual with remarkably unique hair is the worst person on planet Earth, and this person that can't speak in complete sentences that happens to run the vice president's house is the best option we have.
Yeah.
The people that believe this are also the people that are telling you that World War III is on the brink, and they're actively moving the military to that.
Yeah. Well, and you know, war is I wish I could remember who had said it, but it was a very valid point that war is a luxury. People have started to think that peace is the norm, right? Peace is actually a luxury. War is the norm. People are always in conflict. But there are ways, and Donald Trump proved that, to have us in a situation where there is no new war, and you can use other methods to resolve international conflict besides spilling our blood and treasure all over some foreign country. And that's my take on it. When I look at what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan for 25 years, you could ask some of the war hawks and they'll say, well, you know what we got? We didn't get another 9/11 for all those years. But when you pull out of that place after 25 years, the analogy I always use is if you take your finger and you stick it in, think about a lake, go to a TVA lake around here, or some big lake. You stick your finger in it and you stick another finger in it. There is no water where your finger is. The minute you pull it out, that collapses in and upon itself. That's the way the terrorist organizations were over there. And we saw that happen. We spent $3 trillion in foreign wars, and we expended thousands of lives. The moment we leave, they just look at
my great grandchildren are really upset about that, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
keep going.
And then, Iraq is much the same, right? Iraq just had the nut jobs over there just allowed marriage to 9-year-olds. That's the new marriage age that's allowed for men in Iraq. I mean, it's just the place goes to complete shambles. Not that that's necessarily because of the U.S. military. They could have done that even when we were there. But we had zero effect on it. But for the past several years, since we got out of Afghanistan, since we got out of Iraq, these big companies that are paying for the Kamala Harrises of the world, just like they're paying for the Dan Crenshaws and Lindsey Grahams of the world, as soon as we came out, they started losing billions. And you got to get in another conflict. And they were talking about it back then. I don't know if you remember John Bolton and Lindsey Graham both said, we're going to celebrate, Christmas in Tehran. They're always champing at the bit for war. So, I mean, but I will say as well, these are people who don't have to go and don't have to send their kids to go. They couldn't care less.
Sounds like the new vice presidential candidate. Sorry, but don't.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But there are some good people out there trying to fix things. Donald Trump being one of them. His X, by the way, his X Spaces, I was going to mention this right at the onset. So that's tonight. I was going to go live, and I thought there is zero reason for me to go live unless I'm playing his X Space, because millions of people were showing up to watch him on X, and he was basically breaking the internet is what he was doing. And there was a DDoS attack on X, which flooded it. Nobody could get in. So for 45 minutes. Well, when I finally left it, it was over 1 million. It was like 1 million and it was like 1.1 million people there. But then everybody else is restreaming it. So when you pile all that together, it was probably 10 million people watching Donald Trump. And
wow.
It was unbelievable. Like broke all the records. I'm gonna play this funny clip. Do you know who Michael Malice is?
No.
You haven't heard of Michael Malice? Michael Malice is a bit of a, I guess you'd call him I don't know if he's a libertarian or an anarchist. I forget how he labels himself, but he's very funny. And this is his description, by the way, of Kamala Harris. I'm going to play this for you. Yeah.
Right. If you're going after Officer Harris, you're either racist or sexist or ableist.
Right.
So they will use
ableist.
Yeah, because she's a retard. She's literally retarded. I mean, Ukraine is a country in Europe, and Russia is another country and a powerful country, and Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's wrong.
What's really important is what can be unburdened by what has been.
I think of her as America's wine mom. Because bitch seems like she's 3 deep by noon, and she's got the 3 phases of wine mom. She's got happy drunk. Oh my God, this cereal's got a rabbit on it. It's so great. Cackling, cackling, cackling. Then there is drunk at work, where you're trying to make sense, but you don't. Space is around us all and unites us all and inspires us all. And then there's I'm being stern so you don't realize how plastered I am, and I'm making a point. That little girl was me. Now I'm going to go upstairs and don't knock on the door because I'm going to pass out. So those are her 3 ways she talks, and those are the...
Golly.
Oh, I had to play that one. When I saw it, I was absolutely horse laughing. I was like, all right, that one's going on the podcast. Space is around us all. And it's so true, though. Tell me that's not an apt description of how she communicates.
I mean, again, allow society and the watchers of this podcast to rewind themselves 6, 8, 10 years. If you had a person running for president of the United States that their actual quote, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty damn close, was Ukraine is a country in Europe. Russia is another country in Europe. Russia invaded Ukraine. That's bad. If they actually said that, you'd be like,
and Chuck, that's almost that is almost verbatim what she said.
I know.
Like,
that's
you
my
nailed
point.
that
like,
one.
it is a quote, but it's really close. Like, if you had told me, let's rewind to 9/11. If you told me in the 2000 election, which is the first election I voted in, that George W. Bush, the governor of Texas, and Al Gore, the reigning vice president of the United States, if the two of them walked to the center of the aisle on the debate stage and one of them said that, I would have been like, well, of course the other one won. But we're actually having the idea of like, oh man, is it possible? Ooh, I don't know. Maybe Kamala. I'm not sure. Like, what?
Look, I said this in my the episode that I did yesterday. I actually went out today, but I'm a day off. I basically record them one day and I post them next. That the only reason that people really there's a couple of reasons people vote and are considering Kamala Harris and why she's had a bump. I think the woke piece of it is significant and not to be discounted because of her chromosomes and her melanin. Those are 2 reasons that a lot of people are voting for. We heard it with Hillary Clinton. It's time to have a female president. Okay, get it. That's what you think. But you still have to look. I think the most important part maybe are policies and, their the policies. What are their policies? What are they actually going to get done? And she doesn't have any of that.
She's going to lock down the border.
Well, on her website, she still has no policy prescriptions for how she's going to fix anything. But we got to get it done. And I think that the fact that she's not Donald Trump is also still a significant factor. But Trump, when it was Trump versus Biden, those people had already identified themselves. They've siloed themselves into the Democrat Party because it's not Donald Trump. But when you start adding the DEI piece, because she is a DEI hire, and then they foisted this on people by saying, we're not going to let you vote for her. Even though you had a chance back in 2020, before the 2020 election, we gave you an opportunity, and 1% of you wanted her to be president of the United States. 1%. So she dropped out. She never got a single vote. And they said, well, we'll make her vice president because of the DEI stuff. And now they say, well, you know what? You guys you didn't pick her last time, so you're not qualified to pick her this time, right? Because you didn't pick the person that we think meets the woke criteria. So we're just going to throw her in there, circumvent the democratic process. And now how many, Chuck, what I don't understand, maybe you can shine some light on this. Why would people say, okay, I got in a comment battle with somebody. I've been in a couple actually on X and even some of my videos. They're like, no, it's fine. She's the vice president. What does that have to do with anything? She wasn't ever elected. She was chosen to be vice president. Why are some people so willing? Why do you think people are so willing to just give up on the democratic process?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a tough question I know to answer.
But the Trump derangement syndrome, man. And I say this as someone coming out of that fog myself, right? Like, I didn't want Trump to be the candidate at 16, even though I've largely voted right of center my whole life. Or I have voted right of center my whole life. I did not want him to be the candidate at 16. I did not want him to be the candidate at 20. And the more distance I get away from this, I'm like, yeah, to your point, I mean, what are we actually saying? Like, just step away from the emotions for a minute. Back to those two young ladies that identified themselves as like, I'm Jared and I had an abortion. Like, that's the worst day of your life. What are you saying? Let's not be your flag that you're wearing. And now we're on the heels of electing potentially a person that has never received one electoral vote to be the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party. Again, I'm of the opinion that we should have two reasonable candidates that should walk to the front of the room and shake hands and have a civil discourse. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to have another candidate. My point is, she's never received one electoral vote. Like, even back in, what was that? Is that 20? Yeah, like 19 and 20. She got 0 electoral votes from the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Nobody wanted him. And maybe it's because of the weird cackling. Maybe it's because she can't remember if she's an Indian American or an African American. Maybe it's because she was a really bad prosecutor. Maybe it's because she allowed a lot of really bad people to roam the streets of San Francisco. There's a lot of different options. The point of it is, you're on the heels of having someone as the leader of the free world. We'll park whoever the leader is for the free world currently for podcasts, but for this conversation, you're on the heels of having someone as the leader of the free world that's had 0 support from her own party. They're just trotting her out there because that she's a minority. Really? That's the best we got?
Your genitals and melanin those are not your limiting criteria for becoming president of the United States. Sorry.
Or maybe they are.
Well, I'm all for, if there's somebody who runs for president is entirely like, I was a fan of initially for Carly Fiorina. I really liked her when she was running. But if somebody qualified comes up there who's a female and a minority, that is completely irrelevant, because I've always taken the stance that those are the least impressive things about you. Show me what you've done. Show me what you plan to do. Show me how you can lead people. And then I'll consider you, regardless of your melanin, your genitals, your chromosomes, whatever. I don't care. Like, that doesn't bother me. But the fact that they say, no, you have to vote for this person because of the melanin and don't worry about the fact that she's a stooge who's being, who's got the deep state, has their hand up her backside and is working her mouth. Nah, you don't need to worry about that. Just focus on the superficial, people. It's weird, man.
You haven't been to the border. You're right, but I haven't been to Europe either. What's your point?
Because you're the border czar, lady. I'm going to hit one more thing, and I'm going to say that maybe some of these, and this will end on this one, but maybe some of the money the flow of money will change a bit. I'm sure they'll find some other way to circumvent the system. But there are attorneys generals out there, people like Ken Paxton down in Texas, who are trying to stop this spoofing of money. The 65-year-olds making, $15,000 a year in retirement, somehow able to donate $20,000 to the Democrat Party. Well, at least in Texas, they are having to use the CVC code? Whatever that the code on the back of your credit card. I just lost
CVV.
it. CVV. Thank you. The CVV code is now having to be used on any debit cards or credit cards, which wasn't required before by ActBlue, and which is why they were able to launder money into Democrat politics. Now, I will, in full fairness, when I actually researched this months ago, Republicans were doing it too, be it in far lower volumes, but they were doing the $1, $5,000 $1 donations, $1 to $3 donations. So it's happening on both sides. And if this stops, not just Act Blue, but Win Red, which is the Republicans' version of Act Blue, I'm all for it. Stop it. Stop the money laundering in politics. But it's happening on an epic scale, especially since Kamala Harris has come in and the internet sleuths have found it. And Ken Paxton is taking some action. So he's got, he made this point when he was, I forget what case it was. There was one of the big cases. He's taken on a lot of them. I think he's got a stable of like 1,500 lawyers working for the Texas Attorney General's office. So he's got a lot more than Wyoming or Montana or, some other, more spread out state with a lower population. But some of these other, like, come on, Tennessee, get on board. Georgia, get on board. Virginia's doing it. They're attacking the ballot issues. They were the first ones that I reported on that were going after Act Blue. But it's nothing but a win, whether it's Republican or Democrat, right?
If you were, let's pretend for the sake of this conversation that I am an ardent Democrat and I were trying to clean up election interference. If you actually believe in the idea of cleaning up election stuff, then wouldn't you welcome all this?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be like, oh, absolutely, bring all the election integrity in. Let's go. Bring it all. Everything you got.
But they're fighting it.
You can tell, right, but that's how you can tell that they're not actually for America. They're not actually for the idea of continuing freedom. They're for the idea of big, woke, socialized government. Because if they believed in this stuff, this would not be a threat.
Look at the voter ID laws. Who in their right mind says, like, you can't say that a party who is pushing for no voter ID for elections has your best interests at heart or has free and fair elections as a cornerstone for their platform. No, if they're saying that they insult people, then there's countless videos out there. I should have brought one tonight, but I didn't, of them saying that African Americans in impoverished areas, they don't have these. Most of them are white, liberal college students, or just woke individuals, white people that they say, oh, black people don't know how to access an ID. They don't know how to access the internet. Ami Horowitz did a video on this where he went to all of these woke college students, people on the street in liberal cities. And they said, oh, no, we shouldn't have voter ID laws. They're racist because black people don't know how to get IDs. They can't get access to the internet. They don't know how to find their local polling stations. And then he went to Harlem and he asked them. And these sassy black ladies were like, who said that? They were like, you've got to be kidding me. Who doesn't have an ID? Everybody's got an ID. Of course we should have IDs.
I mean, I work so much. I spent 2 months a year down near the border. And I've been fortunate to have you come down there and join me a number of times. All of my colleagues down by the border, not surprisingly, are Hispanic Americans. And guess what? They're more offended by the policies of this administration than I am. They're more upset at the lunacy that they'll be in their backyard and an undocumented illegal immigrant will walk in to their backyard and steal their food or steal their kids' shoes off their porch. This is not a sensationalized idea, guys. This is like A plus B equals C. This is 1 + 1 = 2. What are you actually talking about? The idea we would want to clean up elections should be the basic hallmark and framework of how we establish a civilized government society.
There you go. That's a good one to end on right there, buddy. I like it. All right. Let's go ahead and close, buddy. It's been a good 45 minutes, close to it. Oh, almost an hour. We're working on an hour. So I want to thank, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out, Chuck, here. But thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X, Locals, Rumble, and YouTube. Again, go to continuefreedom.com, sign up for my mailing list. Chuck, I want to thank you again for coming on board. We're going to make this a regular thing. It's always great conversation. It's good because I'm a very conservative guy, and you're conservative, but you kind of lean towards the middle. You're much more middle of the road than I am. So anyways, I appreciate that about you. Love you, buddy. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you in the next video. God bless.